I'm back, and in this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, I, Rafael Barlowe, the director of scouting for NBA Big Board, am going to tell you why I've been gone, and I'm just going to answer some questions that have been in my inbox. I have a ridiculous amount of questions and people asking me for my opinions on different things, so this is going to be Mailbag Monday, something that I have not done in a while. Well, I haven't even recorded a podcast in a while. So stay tuned to hear my thoughts on basically what I haven't talked about in the last few months. I share my thoughts on Summer League, the 2024 NBA Draft, but more importantly, here are my thoughts on basically whatever questions that have been in my inbox over the past few months. Stay tuned. Shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I appreciate each and every person that tuned in and listened through the 2024 NBA draft cycle. But before I get into this episode, I want to let you know that it is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And I was actually just looking at the Game Time app a couple days ago because I want to take my son to a Texas Rangers game. Now that they have this new stadium this new stadium is indoors, and I don't have to sit out in the Texas heat during the summer to watch a baseball game. I'm not that big of a baseball fan, but it is fun to go to the different stadiums and take my son. All right, let's just get right into it. So for those that are wondering where I have been and have, just been wondering about my absence, back in March, my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer. Obviously, we weren't expecting that. It was pretty shocking. And then in April, she had her surgery, and it was just a difficult time, to be honest with you. I mean, I would spend my days going to appointments. I live about 30 minutes from downtown Dallas without traffic, so it would be like, with traffic, 45 minutes to sometimes an hour to go to her appointment. We went to different oncologists, got multiple opinions. She had multiple surgeries. It was just a lot going on. And then we have a toddler. So it was like I'd spend my days in the hospital with her, going from appointment to appointment. And then after she had her surgery, which was probably the hardest part, was she was not able to pick up or hold he's 2 now, but he was 1 year old at the time. She wasn't able to pick him up or hold him for 6 weeks. And then it ended up extending to about 8 weeks. So imagine as a mom, or even as a dad, not being able to pick up or hold your infant sons, or not infant, but toddler son. So it was rough everywhere that I had to go in the evenings. My son went with me. Now he definitely enjoyed going to Mavericks games, and that was a big relief in a sense, because it gave my wife some time alone to rest and heal up. I was able to go to the games and take him since he was free. I think now that he's 2, I probably would have to pay later on. But anyway, it was just a good time for us to bond. And he's a huge basketball fan. I mean, he loves the Mavericks. Basketball is his favorite word, and so on. But yeah, it was a difficult time, and so I just had to take some time away from something, because I was trying to make sure that I was there for my wife and go to all the appointments, trying to overcompensate from my son. And not make it seem like he was that he had to suffer because his mom wasn't able to hold him. And I just had to take a step back. I was able to write. I still wrote for NBA Big Board. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Check it out. Please subscribe to NBABigBoard.com. I was able to write, but writing, believe it or not, was a lot easier to write at different hospitals and in between different locations. So at different appointments, I should say. So I'm back. I'm back to producing content all the time. Now, I'll admit, I may be a little rusty. It's kind of like when you haven't picked up a basketball in months and you get on the court. So, my podcast game may be a little bit rusty, but I'm definitely glad to be back. Thank you for just all the kind messages and emails. I even had people that I've never met before, just complete strangers, offer to send money. I mean, I've had people offer to start GoFundMe's and so on. But it was just interesting to see that there were complete strangers that I had never met, never talked to, that offered to send money for food and different things to support, just because they feel like we've developed some type of bond or friendship or connection just based off of NBA draft content. So I'm thankful for that. Thankful for all the messages. I missed out on a lot, which is not necessarily important in the grand scheme of things, but I missed the combine, I missed the draft, and I had posted a tweet that really kind of shook me up a little bit, because last year at the 2023 draft, I was in Brooklyn at the draft, and then on the day of the 2024 draft was the day of my wife's first chemotherapy session, and I spent the day cold capping. And if you're not familiar with cold capping, my wife is trying to save her hair. It's this process. It's kind of like a swim cap that's frozen on dry ice, and it has to be between negative 32 and negative 38 degrees. And I have to change this cap every 15 minutes for 6 hours, because my wife wants to do as much as she can to keep her hair. So that was my draft day. 2024 draft day was our first chemo session, and literally every 15 minutes I was changing this cold cap and putting it on ice so she can keep her hair. So it just makes me appreciate health and appreciate, just the little things that I may have taken for granted, like being able to travel and so on. So anyway, I know I've kind of went overboard and it's kind of long-winded, but let's get into some of the questions from my inbox, as this is Mailbag Monday, which I haven't done in a while. So let's get to the first question. It is, what were your thoughts on the top prospects in the 2024 NBA draft, and who do you think has the highest potential based off of what you saw in Summer League? Well, the 2024 NBA draft is something that a lot of people thought was a weak draft, and I thought Summer League kind of proved that maybe it is a stronger class than what a lot of people had originally thought. But then on the flip side of that, you can say the first two picks, Zachary Risacher and Alex Sarr, kind of struggled, and they did not look like I'll just say that they didn't have really strong performances. I thought Reed Sheppard had a really strong Summer League. I thought Kel'el Ware had a strong Summer League. And if you've been following my work, whether it's the podcast or the newsletter, I'm a huge Kel'el Ware fan. I just thought it was insane that a guy that's 7 foot, athletic, can block shots, shot 42% from three. Maybe it wasn't a great volume of attempts, wasn't considered a lock to go in the lottery, and I thought he ended up in a perfect situation in Miami. I thought Bub Carrington showed some flashes, but I think the 2024 class is probably going to be a little bit better than a lot of people thought. All right, the next question is, can you break down the strengths and weaknesses of some of the key players in the 2025 draft class? I mean, that can be a whole episode in itself, and I actually plan to do some breakdowns on players, individual episodes on some of the top players in the 2025 draft. Just off the top of my head, Cooper Flagg is the favorite to be the first guy selected. Phenomenal athlete, the best defensive player that I've ever scouted on the high school level. I mean, he just impacts the game as a shot blocker, switchy defender in so many ways. Really good athlete. I mean, really good athlete, makes impact. And just a few weeks ago, while I was at one of my wife's hospital visits, I pulled up Synergy on my laptop and just watched literally every possession he had last season at Montverde. And I even underrated him. He's a much better passer than I thought. The jump shot has definitely improved. And the thing that I like the most is that he's improved as a shooter, not just a spot-up shooter, but as a shooter on the move. As far as weaknesses, I mean, I think it's kind of nitpicking. I think he can be a better ball handler. I think he'll need to become a more consistent shooter, but he's definitely heading in the right direction. And then there's Ace Bailey, a guy who I think has a chance of passing Cooper Flagg. Ace is young. I mean, both are young. Both are really young. I like his upside as a shot maker and a scorer. I'm down on his shot selection. I think he has terrible shot selection. I think he settles for too many mid-range jumpers when he has the athleticism and ball handling to attack the rim. So that's just a couple. But again, stay tuned. The NBA Big Board will definitely have a lot more articles where, or a lot more videos, I should say. Again, this is the part of me being rusty. We'll have a lot more videos of breakdowns on our opinions on some of the top players in the 2025 NBA draft. All right, when we return, I'll ask a few more questions. I'll ask some questions about how I evaluate college versus high school and so on. But before we get into the second segment, I want to talk to you about eBay Motors, because passion, drive, and patience, that is the formula, the winning formula, or the formula for winning championships. And it is also what keeps your ride or die alive. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle, to level it up to peak performance, whether it is superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed or power or style, eBay Motors has you covered. They have over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, and you will always find exactly what you are looking for. And with eBay Motors, they have what they call the guaranteed fit. And the guaranteed fit means your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you will get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber and not blowing cash. And with all the parts you need and the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available for U.S. customers. Once again, I want to thank you for making the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. But for your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NBA podcast, because with Locked On, there is no offseason, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts, and you get it in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as formed and as entertained as the Locked On NBA crew. It is available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, and it is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every single day. All right, second segment. I know the first segment had very little to do with basketball, and it was an update on my life, so I apologize for taking too much of your time talking about what has been going on with me the last few months. All right, but let's get into these questions. All right, question number 3. How do you evaluate the impact of college performance versus potential in drafting players? Well, I do place heavy emphasis on how a guy performs in college, and sometimes it's hit or miss. Like the first example that comes to mind is Patrick Baldwin. I was not a big Patrick Baldwin fan. I thought the numbers indicated that he is, not worthy of. Well, he was a first round pick, but I just thought he was overrated, and I used the college numbers to back that up. I thought, all right, if the guy doesn't dominate mid-major basketball when he was a projected lottery pick coming into the season, I just thought that was a sign. And as of now, it's still early. It appears that I was right. But in a situation where I was totally wrong was, I believe it was in the same draft as Peyton Watson. Watson averaged like 5 points a game, if that, and he has proven to be a rotation player on a contender, a team that has championship aspirations. So I think you can't just rely on the numbers. I think you have to, look at the situation. And in Watson's situation, he went to UCLA, which went to the Final Four the season before. I think Johnny Juzang, who was expected to enter the draft, came back to school. He had Jaime Jaquez there. So he was behind a couple NBA players. Even though he may have been better than Juzang, or better prospect than Juzang, I think with UCLA going to the Final Four the year before, and I think it would have just been tough to replace a guy that was a starter for a freshman. And so situation matters. Now, I'll be honest, I did not think that Peyton Watson was worthy of a first-round pick, and I was just totally based off of his numbers. And then as far as like college performance versus potential, you can talk about in the 2024 draft, Bronny James. I am on the record of saying I don't think Bronny James is an NBA player. Now, he did show in the last 2 Summer League games that he is better than his college numbers, but I went back and looked at the numbers of guys that were selected 55th overall in past drafts, and they all average about 9 or 10 points a game in Summer League. So Bronny James is a guy that I did look at the college numbers. I even looked at his high school numbers, and there's nothing about those numbers that screamed NBA player to me. But he's obviously going to get a chance. But to answer your question, I do look at the high school numbers, but I mean the college numbers, but I do also have to factor in fit situation with somebody coming off an injury, and that's one of the things with Bronny. You can say that he missed a significant part of preseason out while he had the heart issue. So, but I do factor in the numbers. All right, question number 4. What role does international scouting play in the NBA draft, particularly for the 2025 NBA draft class? I mean, the international prospects are here to stay. I don't think that the 24 class is an outlier in a sense, where we had the first 2 picks were international. I think 3 of the top 6 picks in 2024 were from France. And in 25, I think that there's going to be quite a few guys, international players, that end up being first-round picks or even lottery picks. I have an episode coming up with my brother where we're going to talk about some of the top performers at the U18 Eurobasket tournament that just ended on Sunday. And I wrote an article on NBABigBoard.com. Check it out. Again, if you're not subscribed, check it out, NBABigBoard.com. I wrote an article on Nolan Traore and Noah Singay and Hugo Gonzalez, 3 guys that were projected to be lottery picks on a lot of different mock drafts. A lot of scouts like those guys and project them as, top, at least players that can go in the top half of the 2025 NBA draft. And what was interesting about this tournament is that all 3 guys played well. To a certain extent, all 3 guys showed why they're so hyped, but none of the 3 guys made the All-Star 5, which is basically the starting 5 of the all-tournament team. And the Spanish team finished in 13th place. They were 3-4. France was 6-1, but they finished in 5th place, even though they have 2 guys that a lot of people consider lottery picks. So that just shows how strong the international class is. And but I think in 2025, I mean, you got to figure Ben Seraph has to be mentioned in that group. He averaged 28 points a game at that tournament. And then you got Igor Dimin, who's going to BYU. You got Malo Ouch, who's playing for Duke, who definitely has to be in that mix. Then you got Rico Zakarski, a guy that's playing in the NBL that's going to be in that mix. So I think it's going to be a strong international class in 2025. But I will say that I think the top 5 picks are going to be American players. All right, number 5. When you factor in the draft, how do team needs and draft position influence a team's draft strategy? I do believe in drafting for need. I know a lot of people say, well, you got to take the best player available. But I think sometimes if you take the best player available and he's not a good fit, then you kind of, you don't put him in the best situation to succeed. And, an example to me is Ron Holland going number 5 to the Pistons. On one hand, I get the pick as far as upside, and if they thought he was the best player available, which I believe they did, then that's why they selected him so high. But I don't think it's a really good fit. I don't think he complements Cade Cunningham. I thought that he played well in Summer League as far as like putting up numbers, but if you follow Ron is always going to put up numbers. He's going to get his points, but I don't think that was the best fit for him or for Detroit. Now, he does have plenty of time to improve as a shooter. He's only 18 years old. But I think that's an example of a team that went with best player available, but it may not have been the best situation as far as fit. All right, when we return, I'm going to wrap up this last segment of Mailbag Monday. I mean, I could probably make this 10 episodes. I have so many questions. And shout out to everybody that was asking my opinion on different draft-related topics. I actually like when people ask questions. I don't have the time to answer and respond to all of them, but shout out to everyone that has sent me some of these questions. All right, when we return, we're going to wrap up this episode of Mailbag Monday. But first, let's talk about Game Time, because Game Time is my personal favorite app when it comes to buying tickets. And I love going to Major League Baseball games during the summer, if the weather permits. I went to a Yankees game last year. And like I mentioned in the open, I haven't been to a Rangers game in a while just because it's so hot in Dallas in the summertime. But now that they have a new stadium, I plan on going to quite a few Rangers games. When it comes to looking for tickets, I go to the Game Time app because you can pick out specific games that you would like to attend. And they have the best deals on the Game Time app. They have last minute tickets. They have flash deals. They have zone deals. And it's easy, very easy to find and buy major league tickets for any type of event in your area. What I like most about the Game Time app is that they give you views from the stadium. So you know exactly where you're going to be sitting. It's not just a generic drawing. It's actually the view from the specific seat. And they have the lowest price guarantee. They even have an event cancellation protection, job loss protection. So if the event is canceled, which is rare that Major League Baseball games are canceled, but hey, I live in Texas. Tornadoes happen pretty often around this time of year, so it's not unheard of for a game to be canceled. And if there is a situation where the game is canceled, Game Time has you covered. Again, priority last minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute deals or tickets on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They have flash deals. You can save even more with the exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or the event. And I talk about the zone deals. You can save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats. I've done that before, and it ended up being a win. And like I mentioned, they got the seats. You get a panoramic view of your seat in the app before you buy. And another thing that I like is all-in pricing. Last year, I went to the Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence fight, and I was looking at different apps, and I tried to compare the prices to Game Time, but Game Time has a button where you can toggle where you get the all-in prices, so you are not surprised. So if a ticket is $50 and you get to the checkout and you see that it has jumped to $150, that's not happening on Game Time. They have the all-in pricing. So download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA. You can get $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Please create an account, use the redeem code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app for last minute tickets and the lowest price guaranteed. All right, last segment. All right, here's a question, and this is probably was sent to me a few months back, as I imagine it's related to the 2024 draft, but it's still relevant. And the question reads, what are some of the common pitfalls teams should avoid during the draft process? And I can probably go all day talking about this. I think teams spend a lot of time, or maybe too much time, on intel. And intel is very important. Don't get me wrong. Intel is very, very important. But sometimes when a player has what a team may call character issues, I think you have to really dig into the surface of why this player may have these character issues. So I'm going to give you just an example. I wrote about it a few months back. So if you're not subscribed to NBA Big Board, I know it's like my third time plugging it. Check it out. So I wrote this article on Gigi Jackson. So a lot of people that have been following me know that I'm a huge Gigi Jackson fan. I thought that he was worthy of a lottery pick, even a top 5 pick in the 2023 NBA draft. He ended up being the 45th pick. He averaged 14 a game and had a 40-point game. And I'm just a big fan of his talent. Now, Gigi fell to number 45, and the intel was about, he was immature, and it didn't help when he went on Instagram Live and questioned the coaching staff and some of his teammates for not giving him the ball in the clutch. And so I ended up interviewing some different scouts, and I interviewed a former NBA coach. I interviewed different people about how a talent like that can fall through the cracks. And so a friend of mine mentioned that he felt like NBA, I can't remember exactly what he said, but he said intel is like black and white. It's very black and white. But digging deep into the intel, you need to find out the player's background and his history and his family, and it will provide color to the intel. So anyway, when speaking with a friend of mine that I think his title's like a performance optimization coach, he deals with mindset for athletes. And one of the things that he mentioned as far as intel and how it relates to Gigi Jackson and maybe some other players is that you have to understand like the player's background, where he comes from. He mentioned intel is black and white, and digging deeper into the player provides color to the intel. And so he mentioned that sometimes that he thinks that front offices aren't as diverse as they should be. And he mentioned that maybe a black person who grew up in the church would have better understood that Gigi may have been a little bit immature because, one, he skipped his senior year of high school. Two, he grew up in a home where he went to church 3 or 4 times a week. And sometimes, when you're kind of sheltered a little bit, you don't have the same real life experiences as someone that hasn't been sheltered. And so this is just a kind of like a vague example. And so I do think that Gigi's intel, because he was seen as immature, played a major role in him falling to 45. And I think that, when we look, even like right now, he was in first, or he was all rookie. But even when you look right now, or 2 years or 3 years down the line, there's going to be a large amount of players that were drafted ahead of him who are going to be out of the league and who won't be as productive. And the reason is because they had better intel. So I do think that intel can be a little bit overrated. Now, I definitely believe you do need to do your due diligence and do your background. You need to understand, all right, if we're Miami, if we have a guy that likes to go out and likes to party, and if he was a big party animal on a college campus in a small town, is he going to be able to handle living in Miami as an 18 or 19-year-old with millions of dollars in his pocket? So I do think that intel is important, but I do think that sometimes teams can make mistakes by overvaluing the intel because these are 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. And you're not necessarily giving them an opportunity to grow. And a lot of times it's their first time away from home. So some of the immaturity and some of the mistakes that they made while they were young is because it's like their first chance at real freedom. All right, the next question is, what role do you think analytics and advanced metrics play in today's draft decisions? I think they play a big role. I think they play a huge role, and teams are building like front offices full of like analytics guys. And just to give my personal opinion, I think we're getting to the point where, some of these stats are incredible. Like I saw this breakdown of, and I couldn't, maybe I'm just not smart enough, but it was just so deep in analytics. And I'm just like, when are we watching the games? I feel like you have to use the eye test first, which is something that I do. I'm going to use my eye first. And then I'll use some of the analytics to see if it backs up what my eyes are seeing. But I do think we're getting to the point where the numbers are just becoming too influential. But yeah, I just think too much emphasis is being put on the numbers. I know I'm probably sounding like somewhat of a hater of analytics and intel in this. But again, some of these numbers that are being thrown out to evaluate players are just absolutely crazy to me. Like for me, again, watch the game. Can the guy play? I think right now we're at a situation in basketball scouting where everyone's trying to prove that they're smarter than each other, and everyone wants to prove that they work harder than each other. And so sometimes by trying to prove that you're the hardest working, you're coming up with different statistical formulas and modules. To me, just watch the game and then try to use analytics to back up what you see, not lead with analytics first, because again, in my opinion, some of these statistics that are being thrown out to prop up a player or tear down a player are absolutely ridiculous. All right, last question is, what trends have you noticed in recent drafts that may continue into the 2025 draft? We talked about the international influence. I think that's definitely here to stay. I do think that we're going to see a lot of French prospects in the next few years. I do think that because of the success of Wembanyama, I do think that some French prospects are going to be a little bit overvalued, but I do think that the international prospects are here to stay. As far as trends that I would like to see, I do think that there's going to be a lot more emphasis on vertical lob threats, in a sense. I think that with Derek Lively And of course, you got to have like the playmakers to make it happen to enhance like a vertical lob threat. But I do think that you're going to see vertical lob threats going a little bit higher in the draft. I mean, you look at some of the top vertical guys in today's NBA, and they weren't really high draft picks. But I do think that if you have spacing on the wings, or you have a playmaker, a guy that can space the floor, stretch the floor vertically, gives you a weapon. And I like what Dallas did when they had two vertical lob threats with Lively and Daniel Gafford on the floor. So you got 45 minutes of athletic rim protectors that can catch lobs. And again, I know not every team has a Luka or a Kyrie, but I do think that you're going to start seeing more of that. And when I look at some of those Houston Rockets teams that with James Harden, Clint Capella made life easy for Harden. And then I think about the Clippers team and how last year they just did not have a vertical lob there. They didn't have a lot of athletes on the floor. And so I look at how Capella has helped Trae Young. And so I just wonder, are we going to see trends where teams are going to start valuing guys that can jump out the gym and catch lobs a little bit more, especially if you can run the floor and block shots and anchor a defense. I think you'll see guys go higher. And like I mentioned with Kel'el Ware, I know it's summer league, and I know that it's way too early to do like a redraft for 2024, but I think he goes higher, and I do think that he's going to look even better with Miami's, I want to say, senior team, as if that was the JV team, but once he has like better playmakers around him. Well, that wraps up this episode of Mailbag Monday. Once again, thank you for supporting the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast. Thank you for checking on me and reaching out while I was out, but letting you know now that I am back. And in the next episode, me and my brother James, we're going to talk about some of the top international players who will be in the 2025 NBA Draft. We're going to talk about how they fared at the U18 Eurobasket 2024 tournament that just wrapped up Sunday in Finland. Once again, it's Rafael. Thank you. Again, I just can't thank you enough. Thank you for making the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. Now go and check out Locked On NBA, the Locked On NBA podcast, because the season never ends here on Locked On. We got the national experts providing you with breaking news, and whether it's your local perspective, you can find it all on the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast. I am